Now, this week we're doing something a little bit different. We've heard so many comments about prices in our supermarkets and how high they are compared to other parts of the world. So what we've done this week, we've sent our roving reporter, Ian Dickenson. He's gone over to the UK and he's actually in Yorkshire, which is northern England. He's gone along and he's had a look at some supermarkets and looked at prices. And now he's going to tell us how it's going, what they're like over there compared to here. Ian.
Hey, John. Morning, John, or should I say good evening, John? Yeah, we had a great visit this morning. We arrived in the UK the other day. We're actually on our southern leg of our trip, so we're down south, and we visited a Sainsbury's in Alton in Hampshire today. Alton in Hampshire is a medium-sized town, but the size of the Sainsbury's is it's quite a large supermarket. The town's got Marks and Spencer's food hall, and it's also got an Aldi which I visited as well. But I think more about that next week. But I think probably one of the things that struck me, my initial impressions were, I guess, just from a COVID perspective, very few people wearing masks in the supermarket, and it's quite hard to adjust to that when we've been wearing our masks so diligently. And the other thing I think that struck me as well is the amount of clothing that's for sale in the supermarket too. I think in the UK, the supermarkets do so much other than just food, and a great range of clothing in Sainsbury's and obviously the houseware that you also get in New Zealand as well. But we headed straight to the food section and particularly the meat. It's something I think that in my mind I had a perspective or perception that the prices in the UK would be incredibly cheap. But we got a few surprises, actually. For instance, the range of meat was not what I'd remembered from previous visits and time spent in the UK. And just talking to people, in the family, my wife's family who are down here, they told me that the range of meat, particularly since COVID, a bit like we've been having in New Zealand, is definitely less. There's a lot less range of meat or range of cuts than they were previously used to. But, some kind of price comparisons. Pork is incredibly cheap. It is cheap, and there's lots of it. 16 back bacon rashers, and when we'd normally buy back bacon when we were in New Zealand, £2.85 for 16 back rashers, Sainsbury's one. So that's the equivalent of $5.40. And it's good quality bacon. And for me, that's probably about half the price. But pork was plentiful. We had a look through, we moved down the aisle, steak or rump steak. There was only one rump steak, but it was the equivalent of $7. I've seen that a dollar is it's 53 cents, I think, at the moment. So it's about $7. For a nice piece of rump steak, which I thought was pretty much equivalent, slightly cheaper probably in the UK. And then we headed on because we tried to find some New Zealand produce, and we found some half lamb legs, or leg of lambs, and what is quite interesting because over here they price it pretty much the same as the UK stuff. So basically, it's from New Zealand. Because you can see the New Zealand flag on it, but it's in amongst the UK lab. And people can kind of make their choice, but a half lamb leg was around about $26, which and I like buying legs of lamb, was about equivalent for me. It wasn't the biggest piece, but there was a whole leg of lamb, and that was $34. So not a little cheaper, but I guess when you kind of take on the thought that this thing has traveled like me halfway across the world, it is slightly irritating as a Kiwi that I can buy a leg of lamb in Sainsbury's in the UK, the same price, if not ever so slightly cheaper than I can in New Zealand. But there we go. And the lamb rump was.
Ian? What about staples? Bread,
staples, flour? Yeah. We were looking at stuff, so bread. We weren't looking for the cheapest, but there were loaves of bread in there that you could buy for 60p, which is about $1.13, and it was good white bread. It wasn't the thinly sliced like a piece of paper. Farmhouse seed loaf, a really nice loaf that was at 85p, which is the equivalent of $1.60. Things like cheese was for me is a lot cheaper. It's $4 a pack for about 400 grams of. It could have been extra mature, it could have been medium, which is the equivalent of about $9.90 a kilogram. And again, a lot more range.
What about milk?
Milk. Now, I'm afraid, John, I didn't find the milk, but so I can't kind of give you the price. I did ask, but I've been too busy drinking it. But butter was interesting because there's an equivalent product that we would get in New Zealand. I like buying Lurpak spreadable butter. You know, the stuff that's specially spreadable. And a big 500 gram pack of that is £4. So that's $7.50. So that is cheaper. You know, home brand butter, Sainsbury's home brand butter is the equivalent of $3.30 a pack. So again, I know we can buy home brand butters in our supermarkets, but eggs, John, I know you were interested in eggs. There's lots of signs on there at the moment, even for free range eggs. That obviously at the UK, there's something that's making them keep the chickens indoors, some kind of disease, and it's under vet's advice. So even free range eggs.
It's a bird flu.
There's a bird flu, right?
To keep them indoors, which means they can't train them to be free range. They have to. Well,
they are still branded. All right. Really? Well, they're still branded to be free range, John. But the sign is saying at the moment they're living indoors, but they're still being branded as free range. But they were really cheap. And so you can get 12 eggs, Sainsbury's eggs, free range eggs, and that was $1.80. So that's $3.40, £1.80, $3.40 for 12 eggs, which is incredibly cheap. It's about 15p an egg. Right. So that was very interesting, and lots of signage around about those eggs.
Now, honey, anything that you noticed in the supermarket that was unusual? I know you've mentioned clothes. Anything on the food wise that was unusual that you wouldn't expect to see in New Zealand?
Well, Marmite has been something that I know I've asked you about previously in the past. There are now some different kinds of Marmite, which is very unusual. Right. So as well as having lots of different sized jars now, you can buy Marmite with chili flavor. You can buy Marmite that's salt reduced, which I would say is a bit of kind of defeating the purpose of Marmite. And you can buy extra old Marmite now, which must be very strong. You know, but nice kind of typical New Zealand favorites in there. You know, it's nice seeing kind of Oyster Bay and Brancott and Stoneleigh wines in the aisles. Nice seeing New Zealand honey, but quite pricey. I'm not a honey expert, and I know it's not there's a factor on it. So it's plus 100 honey, a little 225 gram jar of Rouse honey was $18, and 250 honey plus 250 honey was $26 for the same size. So there are the odd.
So that's you are right, dollars, not pounds.
No, dollars. So it's £14.
Oh,
and
okay.
New Zealand verified honey.
Okay.
But fruit and
I
veg
think we'll have to wind it up there, Ian, because we're running out of time. But we've asked you next week to go into an Aldi. Lots of people here have talked about Aldi because, as you know, Aldi is over the ditch in Australia. And they feel that if Aldi came to New Zealand, it would make a hell of a difference with prices in New Zealand.
Well, we did have a very quick look around, thinking ahead to next week, and it is definitely cheaper.
We'll talk to you again next week.